The story of Solomon is rather sad, one of the disappointments in the Bible. Solomon had great promise when he ascended to the throne, possibly as young as 20 years old. He was given a wonderful opportunity. The account of Solomon's life has a period where he turns from God. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter: Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. No one else in the Bible rose as high as Solomon, and few fell as hard and as low. Solomon began amassing a large number of foreign wives and concubines. For starters, this was a problem because it contradicted God's original design of one man and one woman being united together. Genesis 1, 22-25. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth." And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind." And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Second, marrying women from the surrounding nations was clearly forbidden, as God had warned that such women would turn the Israelites' hearts away from following their gods. Third, as God had instructed Moses, the king in particular was not to acquire many wives for himself, so that his heart wouldn't go astray. Tragically, Solomon had neglected these truths not once or twice, but hundreds of times. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. They did indeed turn his heart away. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. The indictment is repeated in the following verse. Solomon's wives turned his heart away to worship other gods. Interestingly, this happened when he was old, implying that decades of marrying foreign wives and providing for their false worship had sapped Solomon's spiritual vitality. But that was no excuse for his sin. He was not as devoted to the Lord as his father David had been. The comparison to David was unavoidable, because Solomon was the heir to God's promise to give David an everlasting throne. While David had also sinned greatly, he had repented. Solomon, on the other hand, at this time, only continued on his downward spiral. He followed Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. 8. He did the same for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. The list of false gods and goddesses that Solomon followed and for whom he built high places is shocking. Ashtoreth, Milcom, and Chemosh were the gods of the surrounding nations, and Scripture doesn't hold back. What the king did was evil in the eyes of the Lord, because such idols were abhorrent. But because all of Solomon's foreign wives burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods, he built temples for them. It's ironic that the king who built the magnificent temple for the one true God was now erecting shrines to idols. To say he was unfaithful to the Lord is an understatement. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. The Lord had appeared to Solomon in dreams twice and made enormous promises to him. 1 Kings 3, 5-15. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." 6. Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day." 7. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. 8. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. 9. So give your servant a discerning heart, to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me, and keep my decrees and commands, as David your father did, I will give you a long life." Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. 1 Kings 9, 1-9. When Solomon had finished building the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, and had achieved all he had desired to do, the Lord appeared to him a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, "I have heard the prayer and plea you have made before me. I have consecrated this temple, which you have built, by putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. As for you, if you walk before me faithfully, with integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father when I said, 'You shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. But if you or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, and go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them, and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. Israel will then become a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples. This temple will become a heap of rubble. All who pass by will be appalled and will scoff and say, "Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple?" People will answer, "Because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshipping and serving them. That is why the Lord brought all this disaster on them." Despite this, the king repaid God's kindness by turning his heart away from him. Needless to say, the Lord was incensed. Despite God's explicit warning, Solomon ignored him. So the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you, and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." The Lord appeared to Solomon one more time, this time with a message of judgment. Solomon's kingdom would be torn away and given to another as a result of his rejection of the Lord. His kingdom would crumble, despite the fact that it appeared to be invincible. Solomon's son would keep a portion of the kingdom, one tribe. The remainder, however, would be claimed by Solomon's servant. While God would not allow the kingdom to split until Solomon's son was in power and would still grant him a throne, he did so not because Solomon deserved a reprieve, but for the sake of David and for the sake of Jerusalem. How did Solomon receive the message of judgment? The Bible doesn't say so, but God's judgment was final. Then the Lord raised up against Solomon an adversary, Hadad the Edomite, from the royal line of Edom. Earlier, when David was fighting with Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, who had gone up to bury the dead, had struck down all the men in Edom. Joab and all the Israelites stayed there for 6 months, until they had destroyed all the men in Edom. But Hadad, still only a boy, fled to Egypt with some Edomite officials who had served his father. They set out from Midian and went to Paran. Then, taking people from Paran with them, they went to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house and land, and provided him with food. Pharaoh was so pleased with Hadad that he gave him a sister of his own wife, Queen Tahpenes, in marriage. The sister of Tahpenes bore him a son named Genubath, whom Tahpenes brought up in the royal palace. There, Genubath lived with Pharaoh's own children. While he was in Egypt, Hadad heard that David rested with his ancestors, and that Joab, the commander of the army, was also dead. Then Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me go, that I may return to my own country." "What have you lacked here that you want to go back to your own country?" Pharaoh asked. "Nothing," Hadad replied, "but do let me go." Solomon didn't have to worry about how God would carry out his judgment. God raised up 2 foreign enemies and 1 domestic foe against the kingdom in his own day. Hadad the Edomite was a survivor of the slaying of the Edomites during David's reign, which was led by Joab, David's brutal army commander, who did not stop until he had killed every male in Edom. Hadad was a boy at the time and a member of the royal house in Edom. Israel's ancient enemy to the southeast descended from Esau, Abraham's grandson. In Egypt, Hadad found asylum, and so much more. He won the Pharaoh's favor, and he was given a house, land, and a wife. Despite his apparent ease there, Hadad couldn't wait to return to his homeland once he learned that both David and Joab had gone. He was undoubtedly enraged by Israel and seeking vengeance. And God raised up against Solomon another adversary, Rezin, son of Eliada, who had fled from his master, Hadadezer, king of Zobah. When David destroyed Zobah's army, Rezin gathered a band of men around him and became their leader. They went to Damascus, where they settled and took control. Rezin was Israel's adversary as long as Solomon lived, adding to the trouble caused by Hadad. So Rezin ruled in Aram and was hostile toward Israel. Rezin was Solomon's second foreign adversary. Again, divine sovereignty was in play. Rezin was raised up by God. During David's reign, he led a raiding party that was a thorn in Israel's side throughout Solomon's reign. Rezin eventually ascended to the throne of Aram and despised Israel. Jeroboam rebels against Solomon. Also, Jeroboam, son of Nebat, rebelled against the king. He was one of Solomon's officials, an Ephraimite from Zeradah, and his mother was a widow named Zeruah. Here is the account of how he rebelled against the king. Solomon had built the terraces and had filled in the gap in the wall of the city of David his father. Now Jeroboam was a man of standing, and when Solomon saw how well the young man did his work, he put him in charge of the whole labor force of the tribes of Joseph. The man described as Solomon's servant was by far the most significant of his enemies. Capable Jeroboam was from the tribe of Ephraim, the northernmost tribe. Solomon had given him command of the entire labor force of the house of Joseph. However, Jeroboam eventually rebelled against Solomon. From a human standpoint, the reader must wait until chapter 12 to understand why Jeroboam rebelled. However, we learn in 1 Kings 11, 29-40 that Jeroboam's rebellion was part of God's plan to tear the kingdom apart as a result of Solomon's sin. About that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him on the way, wearing a new cloak. The two of them were alone out in the country, and Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. Then he said to Jeroboam, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. But for the sake of my servant David and the city of Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, he will have 1 tribe. I will do this because they have forsaken me and worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Molech, the god of the Ammonites, and have not walked in obedience to me, nor done what is right in my eyes. nor kept my decrees and laws, as David, Solomon's father, did. But I will not take the whole kingdom out of Solomon's hands. I have made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David my servant, whom I chose and who obeyed my commands and decrees. I will take the kingdom from his son's hands and give you 10 tribes. I will give 1 tribe to his son, so that David my servant may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I chose to put my name. Jeroboam's rise to power was confirmed by a prophetic announcement from Ahijah, who visually demonstrated his message by tearing his cloak into 12 pieces and giving 10 pieces to Jeroboam. God told Jeroboam through Ahijah that he would take the kingdom from Solomon, but not during his lifetime. Jeroboam would be given control of 10 of Israel's tribes, and for the sake of David and Jerusalem, the Lord would give Solomon's son 1 tribe. Benjamin, who would side with Judah, is the missing tribe, the tribe that would bring the total to 12. Ahijah provided God's justification for his judgment. They, led by King Solomon, have abandoned me and bowed down to the false gods of the nations. However, as for you, I will take you, and you will rule over all that your heart desires. You will be king over Israel. If you do whatever I command you, and walk in obedience to me, and do what is right in my eyes, by obeying my decrees and commands, as David my servant did, I will be with you. I will build you a dynasty, as enduring as the one I built for David, and will give Israel to you. I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever. God made an amazing promise to Jeroboam. Solomon had given him command of the labor force of the house of Joseph. However, God would appoint him as king of Israel. God even promised to build a lasting dynasty for Jeroboam if he would obey him. Sadly, despite this promising prospect and high expectations, Jeroboam would fail spectacularly. Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam fled to Egypt, to Shishak the king, and stayed there until Solomon's death. As for the other events of Solomon's reign, all he did and the wisdom he displayed, are they not written in the book of the Annals of Solomon? Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel 40 years. 43. Then he rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David his father. And Rehoboam, his son, succeeded him as king. Solomon apparently learned about the prophecy when he attempted to slay Jeroboam, who fled to Egypt until Solomon died. This is, in fact, Solomon's final recorded act. Then came his son Rehoboam to power. Solomon had great promise when he ascended to the throne. Possibly, no one else in the Bible rose as high as Solomon, and few fell as hard and as low.